You're floating, not on the gentle undulations of the Mediterranean, but hovering hundreds of feet above a vast, parched basin. The air, surprisingly, is dry and still, carrying the faint scent of ancient dust. The shimmering blue you once knew has receded, pulling back like a timid tide, revealing a landscape so alien, so utterly monumental, it steals your breath. This isn't just a sandy desert, it's a colossal, complex topography of canyons, plateaus, and what look like the ghostly imprints of submerged mountain ranges. You crane your neck, trying to take it all in, feeling utterly dwarfed by the sheer scale of the reveal. It's like someone hit the reset button on geography, only the old map wasn't erased, just dehydrated. As your eyes adjust to the monumental emptiness, you start to pick out details. Far in the distance, where the deepest parts of the sea once lay, you can almost make out shimmering salt flats, vast wide plains that stretch to a horizon hazy with evaporated brine. Closer, massive underwater volcanoes, once just inconvenient bumps for passing submarines, now loom like forgotten titans, their slopes scarred by eons of currents, waiting to be climbed. You see the exposed continental shelves, once the gentle slopes leading to the abyss, now dramatic cliffs plunging into the new valleys. It's truly a sight to behold, though you might want to pack some serious sunscreen, because there's no water to reflect those rays anymore. And then, it hits you, not a physical sensation, but a ripple of recognition. This newly exposed landscape, stretching from the billows of Hercules to the shores of Asia Minor, feels familiar, in a mythological sort of way. You're looking at the bones of the Mediterranean, the very stage upon which so many ancient myths and legends were born. Think about it, a vast, once submerged land, suddenly risen. Does the name Atlantis ring a bell? Plato's famed lost city, a technologically advanced civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single, terrible day and night. Well, now the waves are gone. You can almost hear the hushed whispers of ancient philosophers pointing towards this colossal, now dry basin, saying, "See, we told you so." Of course, the scientific community, bless their fact-checking hearts, tends to lean towards a less dramatic, more geologically plausible explanation for any real-world inspiration for Atlantis, perhaps the volcanic eruption of Thera. But in this scenario, with the entire Mediterranean laid bare, it's hard not to let your imagination run wild. You can almost see the faint outlines of ancient harbor cities, clinging to what were once coastlines, now miles from any water source, their docks leading to nothing but dusted plains. Perhaps those rings of land and water that Plato described were simply the natural contours of islands or coastal features, now exposed in all their glory. It's suddenly a more spacious parking lot than they used to have. As you glide across this exposed seabed, your gaze is drawn to what look like faint etchings, subtle contours on the vast, new land. These aren't natural formations, they're too regular, too intentional. You realize you're seeing the ghost of ancient cartography, not as it was, but as it would have been if these lands were always dry. Imagine the ancient Greek cartographers, instead of sketching coastlines and islands, trying to map this gargantuan new continent. Their scrolls would have been miles long, unrolling into the desert like the world's most ambitious picnic blanket. They probably would have run out of parchment just trying to draw the shadow of that exposed mid-Mediterranean ridge. Historians still debate whether the concept of a lost continent could have been inspired by prehistoric sea level changes. But seeing this now, it's hard to dismiss the idea outright. Perhaps some distant folk memory, passed down through generations, remembers a time when the world was a little less wet. You almost expect to find a giant, forgotten compass lying in the dust, its needle still pointing north. Bewildered by the lack of waves, you drift eastward, leaving the ghost of Atlantis behind, and the topography beneath you begins to shift dramatically. The subtle undulations of the Mediterranean floor give way to something far more abrupt, a colossal bowl-shaped depression that plunges hundreds, then thousands of feet below the newly established sea level. This is no gradual slope, it's a precipitous drop, like the rim of an ancient, unimaginably vast crater. The air here feels heavier, cooler, and there's a strange, almost eerie silence that seems to press in from all sides. You're hovering over the Black Sea basin, now fully exposed, and it's a landscape that screams of forgotten cataclysms. Instead of the salt-encrusted flats of the Mediterranean, here the exposed seabed is a darker, richer hue, hinting at layers of ancient sediment and decayed organic matter. You can discern the faint, curving lines of what were once steep currents, now etched into the dry earth like colossal fingerprints. But what truly captures your attention are the signs of water, not the ocean's embrace, but evidence of a colossal, freshwater lake. Imagine a vast inland sea, fed by great rivers, cradled by ancient mountain ranges, completely cut off from the global ocean. It's hard to fathom that this massive depression, now dry and stark, was once a thriving freshwater ecosystem, teeming with life unique to its isolated conditions. Then, you notice something else, something truly unsettling. A distinct, almost perfectly straight line runs across the basin, a sharp demarcation in the terrain. It's not a fault line, not a natural ridge. It looks almost like a scar, a colossal watermark that spans the entire basin. And it is, in a way. This line represents the ancient shoreline of the freshwater lake that once filled this colossal bowl. You can imagine the serene, lapping waters, perhaps even the occasional giant freshwater clam, content in its isolation. But then, looking above that line, you see a jumble of debris, chaotic rock formations, and what look like the remnants of ancient river channels, all pointing inward, towards the basin. This is where the story gets dramatic, and a little terrifying. Picture this: for millennia, the Black Sea was a massive, isolated freshwater lake, its surface hundreds of feet below the level of the surrounding Mediterranean, which, in our current scenario, is also dry. But let's just focus on the flood for a moment. The only thing separating these two vast bodies of water was a narrow land bridge, a thin strip of earth acting as a natural dam. Then, around 7.600 years ago, according to one prominent theory, the dam broke. Not just a little leak, mind you, but a catastrophic breach, sending a thundering cascade of salt water pouring into the freshwater lake. This wasn't a gentle trickle, this was a tsunami of biblical proportions. An inrushing deluge that would have made Niagara Falls look like a leaky faucet. Imagine standing on the shore of that freshwater lake, perhaps fishing for your dinner, when you hear it, a low rumble that rapidly escalates into a deafening roar. The horizon darkens, not with storm clouds, but with an advancing wall of water, churning and frothing, carrying everything in its path. You wouldn't have had time to pack a lunch, let alone your ancestral stone tools. This was a forced relocation, courtesy of Mother Nature, on an unimaginable scale. People, animals, entire ecosystems, all swept away or drowned as the Black Sea basin rapidly filled, rising at an astonishing rate. Some estimates suggest feet per day, not inches. It must have been an utterly terrifying, world-altering event for anyone living near its shores. You know, gives a whole new meaning to flash flood, doesn't it? Historians still debate whether this Black Sea deluge was the inspiration for the flood myths prevalent in so many ancient cultures, from the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical account of Noah's Ark. The sheer scale of the event, the sudden and dramatic inundation of a vast inhabited region, certainly fits the description of a global catastrophe from a localized perspective. Think about it: if your entire known world, your valley, your village, your fishing grounds, was suddenly swallowed by an angry sea, Wouldn't you tell your grandkids about a great flood that consumed the world? It's easy to see how such an event could leave an indelible mark on the collective memory of humanity. A truly canonical historical event if there ever was one. It would certainly make for an odd Christmas card, wishing you a merry holiday. Hope your house isn't underwater like ours was last week, leaving the haunting, dried-out Black Sea behind. You feel a subtle shift in the air, a colder, crisper quality, even without the ocean's moderating influence. The landscape below transforms once more, flattening out into an immense, treeless plain that stretches as far as the eye can see, broken only by the occasional low ridge or shallow depression. This isn't just dry land, it feels ancient, wind-swept, and profoundly quiet. You've journeyed to the far north, to a place where, in our watery world, two continents are separated by a vast, cold expanse of ocean, the Bering Strait. But in this scenario, with the ocean strained, you're looking at Beringia, the legendary land bridge. This is no narrow strip of land. Imagine a landmass easily twice the size of Texas, connecting Siberia to Alaska. It's a staggering sight. You can trace the faint, almost imperceptible lines of what were once colossal rivers, carving their paths across the exposed shelf, carrying meltwater from ancient glaciers towards what would have been a distant, lower ocean. The scale of it is almost impossible to grasp. This wasn't just a bridge. It was an entire subcontinent, a fully formed ecosystem that existed for millennia when sea levels were significantly lower during the last glacial maximum. It's like discovering a whole new land on Earth, one that simply decided to take a very long bath. As you glide closer, you start to pick out details on the immense plain. There are vast, open grasslands, seemingly endless, interspersed with the remnants of what were once shallow lakes and boggy areas, now just dry depressions. It's a stark, almost primordial landscape, perfectly suited for large grazing animals. You can almost see the herds of woolly mammoths, their shaggy coats glistening in the low sunlight, trudging across this vast plain, their mighty tusks carving paths through the tough grasses. Beside them, perhaps, woolly rhinos, steppe bison, and ancient horses, all part of a megafauna long gone from most of the world. But here, on Beringia, they would have thrived. It's an ecological snapshot from a forgotten era, laid bare for all to see. You wonder if the mammoths ever complained about the long walk. I mean, that's a lot of steps to get from Asia to North America. But more significantly, this vast land bridge wasn't just a highway for animals. It was the crucial corridor for the peopling of the Americas. Imagine the first humans, our ancestors, hardy hunter-gatherers, making their way across this enormous, exposed land. They weren't setting out on a perilous sea voyage. They were simply following the game, expanding their hunting grounds, step by arduous step, from Siberia into what is now Alaska and then, eventually, deeper into North America. It wasn't a sudden migration. It was likely a gradual expansion over many generations. A slow, methodical exploration of new, resource-rich territories. This was a truly canonical historical event, a monumental chapter in the human story, all made possible by a temporary geological anomaly. Think about the sheer courage, the adaptability, required for such a journey. These weren't tourists with GPS and high-tech gear. These were people relying on their wits, their knowledge of the land, and their incredible resilience. They would have faced brutal winds, biting cold, and the constant threat of predators, all while carrying everything they owned on their backs. It's easy to imagine them huddled around small fires, gazing up at the sky filled with more stars than they had ever seen, pondering the vast, empty plains stretching out before them. Historians still debate whether the first wave of migration involved a single, rapid dispersal along the coast, or multiple waves moving inland across the land bridge, or even if some groups skirted the ice sheets by boat. But regardless of the exact path, the fact remains, Beringia was the critical gateway. An odd detail: the very lack of trees on this vast plain would have made finding firewood a constant challenge, forcing these early inhabitants to rely on animal dung or dried moss for fuel. Talk about roughing it. They probably missed their Amazon Prime 2-day shipping, leaving a vast, empty expanse of Beringia behind. You turn your invisible gaze south and west, crossing what would ordinarily be the frigid waters of the North Atlantic. But here, with the oceans gone, it's a massive, scarred landscape, crisscrossed by the ghost of ancient ice sheets. As you approach the region between Great Britain and mainland Europe, the scenery transforms yet again. The deep, churning waters of the North Sea are no more. Instead, a sprawling, low-lying plain stretches out before you, veined with the ghostly meanders of colossal rivers. This is Doggerland, a lost world, now resurrected from its watery grave. Doggerland wasn't just a narrow strip of land, it was a substantial landmass, at its peak perhaps as large as modern-day Great Britain itself. Imagine a vast, fertile plain, a veritable ancient paradise, stretching from the eastern coast of England all the way to the Netherlands and Denmark. You can clearly see the intricate network of river valleys, now dry, that once drained this enormous territory, flowing into what would have been a much reduced, glacial era North Atlantic. These aren't tiny streams, these are the deeply incised channels of major rivers, cutting through the exposed seabed, hinting at a landscape that was once lush and well-watered. It's like finding an entire lost country right in the middle of Europe. Only it's been under a cold blanket for thousands of years. As you hover over the exposed landscape, you can almost feel the whispers of ancient life. This wasn't just barren tundra. Doggerland was a vibrant, teeming ecosystem. Evidence recovered from the seabed, mammoth teeth, deer antlers, and flint tools, paints a picture of the rich environment, home to diverse animal life. You can picture herds of aurochs, the wild ancestors of modern cattle, grazing on the lush grasslands. Imagine red deer roaming through scattered woodlands, and perhaps even packs of wolves shadowing their every move. This was a true hunter's paradise, a prime territory for early humans who would have followed these migrating herds across its expansive plains. It's truly a canonical historical event, the rise and fall of Doggerland, intimately tied to the ebb and flow of ice ages and sea levels. But Doggerland wasn't just a wildlife haven, it was home to human communities. Archaeological evidence, painstakingly recovered by trawlers dragging their nets across the modern seabed, reveals the presence of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. You can almost see their temporary camps, perhaps by the banks of those now dry rivers, their fires flickering against the vast, open sky. They would have fished in the freshwater rivers and hunted the abundant game, living a life intimately connected to this rich, now lost land. Imagine the stories they would have told, gathered around those fires, about the landscape, the animals, and perhaps even the ever-present, distant roar of the ocean as it slowly, inexorably, began its creeping return. Then, around 8.200 years ago, came the end. Not a sudden, cataclysmic flood like the Black Sea, but a more gradual, yet equally devastating inundation. As the last great ice sheets retreated and melted, global sea levels began to rise. Slowly but relentlessly, the low-lying plains of Doggerland, once so vast and fertile, began to disappear beneath the encroaching waves. Imagine the slow retreat, the gradual loss of land, forcing the inhabitants to higher ground, until eventually, there was no higher ground left. The North Sea, which had once been a distant rumble, became their watery grave. Historians still debate whether the final submersion of Doggerland was hastened by a major tsunami, perhaps triggered by a submarine landslide off the coast of Norway, the Storega Slide, or if it was simply the steady, relentless rise of the post-glacial seas. Whatever the final push, this was an odd detail in the grand scheme of geological change. The thriving land simply faded away, not with a bang, but with the quiet lapping of endless waves. It makes you wonder if they ever tried building really tall stilts. Probably would have just gotten wet feet anyway. You continue your incredible journey eastward, leaving the ghost of Doggerland behind and traversing the vast, newly exposed landmass of what was once the Arabian Sea. The landscape here is dramatically different. Instead of the scarred plains of glacial retreat, you find yourself gliding over a terrain that suggests an ancient, profound fertility. The air is warm, dry, and carries the faint, lingering scent of something organic, something deep within the earth that remembers moisture. You are now hovering over the immense basin of the Persian Gulf. And what you see below is astonishing, the vast, verdant expanse that utterly contradicts your preconceived notions of this arid region. Instead of the desert and shimmering, oil-rich waters we know today, the drained Persian Gulf reveals itself as a massive, low-lying plain, etched with the unmistakable patterns of ancient riverbeds. But these aren't just dry channels. You can clearly see the remnants of extensive marshlands and what appear to be the dried-up husks of enormous freshwater lakes. Imagine, if you will, a landscape teeming with life, fed by the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which, with lower sea levels, would have extended far beyond their modern-day deltas, pouring their life-giving waters into this vast, now exposed basin. This was once a genuine oasis, a fertile crescent not just on the land, but under what is now the sea. It's like finding a secret garden where you least expected it. Only this garden is the size of several countries. This incredible revelation has given rise to a fascinating, if still debated, theory: the Persian Gulf Oasis, around 100,000 years ago, and then again during the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 to 10,000 years ago, when global sea levels were significantly lower. This entire basin would have been exposed. It would have been a truly hospitable environment, a stark contrast to the surrounding deserts, offering abundant fresh water, rich soil, and diverse plant and animal life. You can almost hear the rustle of reeds in ancient marshes, the calls of waterfowl, and the distant rumble of migrating herds. It was, quite literally, a cradle of potential civilization, long before the well-known cradles in Mesopotamia. Consider the implications for early human migration. While our ancestors were expanding out of Africa, following coastal routes and river valleys, this verdant Persian Gulf basin would have presented an incredibly attractive environment. It could have served as a significant refugium, a secure and bountiful stopping point for early modern humans making their way along the southern coast of Arabia towards Asia. This possibility adds an entirely new dimension to the story of how humanity spread across the globe. It's truly a canonical historical event in the grand tapestry of human migration, even if the evidence remains mostly submerged. Imagine, if you were one of those early travelers, stumbling upon this unexpected paradise in the midst of your arduous journey. It would have felt like winning the ancient lottery, complete with all you can't eat wild dates. An odd detail, perhaps, is that some theorists have even suggested that this lush, now submerged region could be the inspiration for various flood myths and stories of lost paradises found in ancient Mesopotamian texts. While the Black Sea deluge offers a more direct, sudden catastrophic flood, the slow, relentless inundation of this vast, fertile land as sea levels rose could have instilled a deep cultural memory of the lost Eden, swallowed by the waters. Historians still debate whether the Dilmun mentioned in Sumerian mythology, often described as a pure, bright land under paradise, could be a veiled reference to this now submerged Persian Gulf oasis. It's a tantalizing thought, isn't it? That some of humanity's earliest stories of creation and loss might have their roots in a literal, geological event that reshaped the very landscape they lived on. Finding your ancient paradise suddenly underwater would be a bit of a mood killer. I'd imagine. Honey, the garden's gone. Again, your journey eastward continues, crossing the now dry expanse of the Indian Ocean, past the exposed coasts of ancient India. The air here is thick with a tropical warmth, even without the humidity of the sea, and the landscape below you shifts dramatically once more. Gone now the stark, dry plains, replaced by a vast, incredibly complex tapestry of river systems, deltas, and what were once enormous, interconnected freshwater lakes, now shimmering with dried silt and ancient vegetation. You are now hovering over Sundaland, a colossal, now submerged continent that once connected much of Southeast Asia. Imagine the modern-day islands of Sumatra, Borneo, Java, and the Malay Peninsula, not as separate entities, but as part of a single, continuous landmass. At its peak, during the last glacial maximum, Sundaland would have been an immense territory, sometimes twice the size of India. What you see below is its exposed heart, a gargantuan plain, intricately laced with the ghost of truly massive river systems. These aren't just small streams, these are the deeply incised channels of ancient, colossal rivers, far larger than anything we see in the region today, that once snaked their way across this entire landmass, draining vast inland areas and carrying their waters towards a distant, lower ocean. It's like discovering the plumbing system for half a continent, all laid bare. This vast, fertile land wasn't just a geological curiosity, it was a vibrant, biodiverse ecosystem, teeming with life. The remnants of ancient forests, now dry and dusty, hinted a rich arboreal environment. You can almost feel the presence of incredible megafauna, perhaps the ancient stegodon, a large elephant-like creature, lumbering through the dense vegetation, or the fearsome gigantopithecus, a giant ape, making its way through the lush canopy. This was a true paradise for a wide array of species, and its exposure reveals a fascinating glimpse into the deep ecological past of Southeast Asia. It makes you wonder if those ancient apes ever got stuck in traffic jams. But beyond the animal life, Sundaland played a pivotal role in the story of human migration. As sea levels dropped during successive ice ages, this vast land bridge emerged, allowing early human populations to expand freely across what are now separate islands. This was the superhighway for the dispersal of early Homo sapiens throughout Southeast Asia and, crucially, provided the pathways for the initial colonization of Australia and New Guinea. This gradual, often episodic, peopling of an entire continent and its surrounding islands is a truly canonical historical event, a testament to human adaptability and ingenuity. Imagine these early explorers, venturing into vast, unexplored forests, navigating immense river systems, completely unaware that in a few thousand years, their pathways would be swallowed by the sea. An odd detail to consider is how the rich cultural diversity of modern Southeast Asia might have been shaped by the slow, inexorable drowning of Sundaland. As the sea levels rose after the glacial maximum, these vast plains gradually submerged, fragmenting the continuous landmass into the archipelagos we know today. This process would have isolated populations, fostering unique linguistic and cultural developments on each new island. Historians still debate whether some of the complex navigation techniques and boat-building skills of early Southeast Asian peoples were developed in response to this rising sea, as they were forced to adapt to a world increasingly dominated by water. It's a compelling idea that the very landscape that birthed them also taught them how to conquer it, creating the maritime cultures that define the region today. Just imagine the conversations. Honey, remember that great hunting spot? Well, it's a coral reef now. You continue your westward journey, leaving the ancient, now dry rivers of Sundaland behind. And as you cross the vast, exposed Eurasian landmass, the climate shifts once more, growing cooler, hinting at its northern latitude. Then, before you, a dramatic new landscape unfolds, a deep, winding valley, resembling a colossal riverbed, But on a scale that defies easy comprehension, this isn't just any valley, this is the exposed basin of the English Channel, and you are looking at the remnants of a mighty river that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. Imagine the familiar narrow straits between Dover and Calais, now completely gone. In their place, the vast, dry trough, carved deep into the earth, stretches for miles. You can clearly see the intricate dendritic patterns of ancient tributaries, snaking their way across what was once the seabed, all converging into a single, much larger channel. This was no gentle stream. During various periods of lower sea levels, particularly during the Ice Ages, this immense valley served as the outflow for a colossal river system, draining not just the rivers of Britain, but also the combined meltwaters of ancient ice sheets and the great rivers of Europe like the Rhine and the Thames. It's like seeing the Grand Canyon, but with a history that involves a lot more dampness. The story of the English Channel's formation, now laid bare before you, is a geological drama of epic proportions. Geologists believe that for much of the last 450,000 years, during various glacial periods, Britain was connected to continental Europe by a land bridge, and the channel was a dry plain. But then, around 450,000 years ago, and again around 160,000 years ago, massive glacial lakes formed in what is now the southern North Sea, trapped behind an ice-dammed chalk ridge that extended from the Weald of Kent to Artois in France. Eventually, these lakes overflowed, not with a trickle, but with cataclysmic bursts of water, carving out the dramatic features you see below. This was a truly canonical historical event in the shaping of European geography, a monumental act of hydraulic power. Imagine the sheer force of those ancient mega-floods, not just one, but at least two, colossal breaches of that chalk ridge, sending torrents of water cascading across the landscape. You can almost see the churning, violent currents ripping through the soft chalk and bedrock, scouring out the deep valley, leaving behind the network of submerged valleys and features we map today. It must have been an unimaginable sight. An entire land bridge literally washed away by an inland sea breaking its banks. An odd detail to consider is that the distinctive white cliffs of Dover, so iconic of Britain's coastline, are a direct result of these floods, carved into stark relief by the erosive power of that ancient deluge. They're basically geological scars from a really bad day at the office for a continent. As you gaze at the newly exposed channel, you can appreciate the profound impact this geological transformation had on human history. Before its formation, humans and animals could freely walk between Britain and the continent. The splitting of the land bridge not only created a natural barrier, shaping Britain's insular identity, but also dictated migration patterns and trade routes for millennia. Historians still debate whether the periodic re-emergence of the land bridge during subsequent ice ages allowed for repeated migrations of early humans, or if the channel remained largely impassable even with lower sea levels due to persistent ice and water in certain areas. But one thing is clear: this once mighty river valley stands as a silent testament to the powerful forces that have shaped our world, dictating the very paths our ancestors took and influencing the course of entire civilizations. You just hope they packed a good waterproof map, though I guess that wouldn't have helped here. From the dramatic, river-carved basin of the English Channel, you zip southeast, across the vast, now dry Arabian desert, until a new, even more profound geological feature sprawls beneath you. This isn't a gentle slope or a carved-out valley, it's a deep, dramatic trench, seemingly ripped apart by an unseen force. The landscape here is stark, almost alien, a mosaic of dark, volcanic rock, shimmering salt flats, and jagged fault lines that stretch for miles. You are now hovering over the exposed floor of the Red Sea, and what you're witnessing is the very birth pangs of a new ocean. Imagine looking down into a colossal tear in the Earth's crust, a massive rift valley that extends thousands of miles from the Dead Sea in the north, through the Red Sea Basin, And deep into East Africa, this isn't just a dried-up seabed, this is a place where tectonic plates are actively pulling apart, slowly but relentlessly. You can see the evidence everywhere, the long, linear valleys, the sharp, angular mountains, and the deep, narrow central trough where, in our watery world, new oceanic crust is constantly being formed. It's like watching geology happen in slow motion, a truly awe-inspiring sight. You almost expect to see giant geological scissors lying around, abandoned after their work for millennia. This great rift has been a profound geographical feature, shaping the movements of life across continents. During periods of lower sea levels, particularly during glacial maximums, the northern end of the Red Sea would have been shallower, or even completely dry, allowing for the formation of significant land bridges. This made the Red Sea region a critical corridor for early human migration out of Africa. Instead of navigating perilous waters, our ancestors could have walked across vast stretches of exposed land, making their way from the African continent into the Arabian Peninsula and then, eventually, onward into Asia and beyond. This profound geological reality is a truly canonical historical event in the story of human dispersal. Think about the challenging conditions these early migrants would have faced. Even without the sea, this would have been a harsh environment, searing heat, vast arid plains, and limited freshwater sources. Yet, the existence of a land bridge, even a difficult one, offered a pathway out of Africa that was otherwise impossible. They would have seen the dramatic landscapes you're witnessing now, the stark beauty of the rift, perhaps even the occasional glimpse of volcanic activity or hot springs, a constant reminder of the restless earth beneath their feet. An odd detail to consider is that the very salt flats you see shimmering in the distance are a testament to the Red Sea's extreme evaporation rates when it was connected to the ocean. In a fully drained state, they'd be even more pronounced. The vast, blinding white expanse where once deep blue waters lay, probably not the best place for a barefoot stroll. Historians still debate whether the primary route for early human dispersal out of Africa followed this Red Sea corridor, or if a more northern route through the Levant was more significant. However, the archaeological evidence emerging from sites in Saudi Arabia and Yemen increasingly points to the importance of this southern pathway, especially during interglacial periods when the climate would have been more hospitable. Regardless of the exact timing and frequency, the exposed Red Sea basin stands as a silent monument to the incredible journeys undertaken by our distant ancestors. It's a reminder that sometimes, the biggest highways are the ones that only appear when the planet decides to change its mind about where it wants water. Leaving the dramatic, rifted landscape of the Red Sea behind, you make a truly massive leap across what was once the vast, deep expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The journey across this newly exposed abyssal plain is dizzying, a seemingly endless expanse of ancient seabed, punctuated only by the monumental presence of the mid-Atlantic ridge, now a soaring mountain range dividing the continents. Your destination, the vibrant, yet profoundly altered, region of the Caribbean. As you approach, the familiar turquoise waters and scattered islands are replaced by a startling panorama. The Caribbean Sea, as we know it, is gone. In its place, you see a vast, low-lying continental shelf, intricately connected by numerous exposed land bridges and significantly reduced distances between what are now islands. Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and the Lesser Antilles are no longer isolated specks in a vast ocean. They are connected by broad, dry pathways, forming an almost continuous landmass that links the Greater Antilles to South America and, less directly, to Central America. It's like someone decided to build a massive, natural highway system right through the middle of what was once a bustling maritime crossroads. Imagine the sheer ecological shift. Instead of coral reefs and vibrant marine life, you're looking at vast plains that were once submerged, now perhaps covered in sparse vegetation, or shimmering salt flats in deeper basins. The deep ocean trenches, such as the Puerto Rico Trench, are now colossal canyons, plunging thousands of feet below your vantage point, a truly dizzying spectacle. The shallower parts, where island nations once thrived, are now broad, fertile plains, crisscrossed by the dry beds of ancient rivers that would have drained these newly exposed territories. It's an almost surreal transformation, turning a watery world into a vast, interconnected land. This profound change would have dramatically impacted the movement of both animals and early humans. The existence of these lost land bridges would have facilitated repeated migrations from the North and South American mainlands into the Caribbean archipelago, animals that are now isolated on individual islands, having evolved unique endemic species, would have had a much broader range and greater genetic exchange. Think of the giant sloths of the Antilles, or the ancient Caribbean monkeys. They could have walked from island to island with these, establishing populations that later became isolated as sea levels rose. For humans, this interconnected Caribbean would have presented incredible opportunities for expansion and interaction. Instead of daring canoe voyages across open water, early inhabitants could have simply walked from Venezuela to Trinidad, or from Cuba to Hispaniola. This vastly improved connectivity would have allowed for more frequent and larger-scale migrations, leading to greater cultural exchange and trade between different groups. The peopling of the Caribbean, which in our timeline was a complex process of maritime migrations from both South and Central America, would have been a profoundly different, and likely much faster, canonical historical event in this dry scenario. It gives a whole new meaning to island hopping, more like island walking. An odd detail to consider is the impact on Caribbean biodiversity. The isolation of these islands led to the evolution of many unique species, from tiny frogs to large mammals, that are found nowhere else on Earth. With the land bridges exposed, this isolation would have been broken, leading to a much more homogeneous fauna, with mainland species colonizing the islands more easily. Historians still debate whether the initial human colonization of some Caribbean islands occurred primarily by coastal land bridge routes, when available, or if sophisticated seafaring technology was developed independently in multiple regions to cross even short stretches of water. But seeing this exposed landscape, it's clear the options for ancient travelers would have been far more numerous, making the whole Paradise Island concept a little less exclusive, and a lot more walkable. Your journey across the dried Atlantic continues, heading north from the now exposed Caribbean. The vast ocean basin beneath you is a site of immense geological forces, with a monumental mid-Atlantic ridge truly dominating the scene. As you approach the northeastern coast of North America, the landscape softens somewhat, losing the dramatic rifts but gaining a new, profound sense of ancient history. You are now hovering over the vast, expansive plains of the Grand Banks, off the coast of Newfoundland. And what you see below is a testament to the immense power of ancient glaciers. Imagine an area that, in our watery world, is one of the richest fishing grounds on Earth, a relatively shallow expanse teeming with marine life. Now, it's a vast, exposed plain, stretching for hundreds of miles, almost like an extension of the North American continent itself. But this isn't just flat land. The surface of the exposed Grand Banks is remarkably uneven, a subtle yet profound landscape of rolling hills, shallow depressions, and long, linear scar marks. These aren't the gentle undulations of sand dunes. These are the unmistakable scars of ancient glaciers. During the last glacial maximum, colossal ice sheets, miles thick, covered much of North America. As these immense ice masses advanced and retreated, they acted like gigantic bulldozers, scraping, grinding, and shaping the very bedrock beneath them. When the oceans dropped, revealing the continental shelf, it also revealed the extent of this glacial impact. You can see the telltale signs, long, parallel grooves carved into the rock, indicating the direction of ice flow. Vast deposits of unsorted sediment, till, left behind as the ice melted, and numerous kettle lakes, now dry depressions, formed where isolated blocks of ice melted long after the main glacier had retreated. It's like a geological canvas painted by ice, a truly awe-inspiring display of planetary sculpture. This exposed land, once a frozen wasteland beneath the glaciers, would have eventually been colonized by sparse vegetation as the climate warmed. Long before the sea reclaimed it, perhaps hardy lichens and mosses, then eventually grasses and low-lying shrubs. While not a primary route for major human migrations, the ecological changes on this exposed shelf would have been significant for animal populations, influencing their movements and grazing patterns. The very formation of these vast, shallow banks, later becoming rich fishing grounds, is a direct result of these ancient glacial processes. This deep geological history is a canonical historical event that underpins the very geography and biological richness of the modern North Atlantic. An odd detail, when you consider it, is how the presence of these ancient glacial deposits contributes to the modern-day productivity of the Grand Banks. The ground rock and sediment left by the glaciers provided a rich, fertile substrate when submerged, contributing to the abundant marine life. So, in a strange twist, the destructive power of ice ages inadvertently laid the groundwork for future bountiful fishing. Historians still debate whether ancient pre-contact fishing communities from the North American mainland or even early European explorers would have observed any unusual shallowing of these banks during minor sea level fluctuations, perhaps sensing the ghostly presence of the drowned land beneath. But seeing it fully exposed, it's clear this wasn't just a seabed, it was once a temporary, albeit harsh, extension of the continent. Imagine trying to explain to an ancient fisherman that the best place to catch cod used to be a giant ice skating rink. He'd probably just stare at you and go back to his nets. Your journey now takes a dramatic turn back across the vast, drained expanse of the Atlantic, gliding over the exposed African continent and sweeping northward towards Europe once more. The terrain beneath you shifts from the ancient glacial scars of the North American shelf to the familiar, yet profoundly altered, coastlines of the European continent. As you approach the boot of Italy, a truly stunning revelation unfolds beneath you. The Adriatic Sea is gone, replaced by a vast, sprawling plain that extends the familiar eastern coast of Italy far, far eastward. Imagine the slender, long arm of Italy, which normally curves around the Adriatic, now dramatically expanded. The familiar coastline of Puglia and the Veneto has been extended by hundreds of miles, revealing a colossal, flat expanse of land. This wasn't just a shallow sea, it was a significant basin, and with the water gone, you can clearly see the remnants of ancient river systems that once flowed across this now dry plain, draining into a much reduced, lower Mediterranean. It's like Italy suddenly grew a vast, fertile annex, a whole new region added to its ancient boot. And yes, all those beach resorts, they're now miles from the nearest, non-existent, water, so pack your walking shoes instead of your flip-flops. During the various glacial periods, when global sea levels were significantly lower, the Adriatic Sea would have been largely, if not entirely, exposed. It became a vast, low-lying plain, bordered by the Apennine Mountains to the west and the Dinaric Alps to the east. This enormous, now dry land would have been a profoundly different environment than the sea we know today. It could have been a mosaic of steppes, grasslands, and marshy areas, fed by the rivers that flowed down from the surrounding mountain ranges. This massive geological transformation is a truly canonical historical event, profoundly impacting the geography and potential human activities of ancient Europe. Think about the implications for ancient human settlement and movement. Instead of a maritime barrier, the Adriatic was once a land bridge, connecting Italy to the Balkan Peninsula with ease. This would have facilitated the movement of both human populations and animal species between these regions. creating broader genetic and cultural exchanges than would be possible in a water-filled Adriatic. Early farmers, for instance, could have expanded more easily across this fertile plain, establishing new settlements and spreading agricultural techniques. It fundamentally alters our understanding of ancient trade routes and cultural diffusion in the region. An odd detail to consider is how this exposed land would have challenged ancient navigation. Imagine being a Roman sailor, expecting a familiar sea route, only to find a vast, dry plain where you once sailed. Are we there yet? No, just more dust. Historians still debate whether the periodic drying and refilling of the Adriatic, over tens of thousands of years, played a significant role in shaping the unique biodiversity of the region's marine life and its terrestrial counterparts. The constant ebb and flow of land and sea would have created periods of isolation and connection, fostering unique evolutionary paths. But seeing this vast, exposed basin now, it's clear that the Adriatic was far more than just a body of water. It was a dynamic landscape, a silent stage for millennia of geological and human history, waiting to be revealed. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, there's a really old, really confused fish wondering where all the water went. Your journey swiftly takes you across the now dry Eurasian continent. Past the newly exposed coasts of East Asia, the landscape below shifts dramatically, becoming a complex interplay of mountainous terrain and broad, sweeping plains. As you approach the familiar archipelago of Japan, a truly astonishing sight unfolds. The scattered islands are no longer isolated. Instead, a series of robust, now dry land bridges connect them directly to the Korean peninsula and the Asian mainland. You are witnessing the ancient pathways that once linked these islands, fundamentally altering their geography. Imagine the modern-day islands of Honshu, Kyushu, and Hokkaido, no longer separated by watery straits, but solidly connected to each other and, crucially, to the continent. The Tsushima Strait, the Korea Strait, and the Larpers Strait, which today divide the islands from each other and from mainland Asia, are now wide, dry valleys or low-lying plains. This isn't just a minor shallowing, it's a complete exposure of the continental shelf, revealing the bedrock and ancient riverbeds that once lay hidden beneath the waves. It's like someone drew a giant connect-the-dots puzzle with land, and Japan suddenly became part of the larger picture. And for those who love their island getaways, well, you're going to need a car now, not a ferry. These Japanese land bridges were a recurring feature during the various glacial periods of the Pleistocene epoch, when global sea levels dropped by tens to over 100 meters. Each time, the exposed shelves formed vital corridors, allowing for the free movement of both animals and early humans. This profound geological reality is a canonical historical event in the peopling of Japan and the distribution of its unique flora and fauna. Consider the incredible impact on animal migration. During these periods of connectivity, large terrestrial animals that are now absent from Japan or are only found in fragmented populations could have easily walked onto the islands. Think of the ancient Narman's elephant, a smaller relative of the Asian elephant, whose fossil remains are found across Japan. They didn't swim there, they walked across these very land bridges, following ancient river valleys and grazing on the exposed plains. Likewise, deer, boar, and various predators could have moved back and forth, establishing populations and creating a continuous ecosystem with the mainland. It's like a prehistoric wildlife highway system for early human populations. These land bridges were absolutely crucial. The initial waves of human migration into Japan, likely from the Korean peninsula and possibly even from Sakhalin Island further north, would have utilized these exposed pathways. Instead of risking perilous sea voyages across unpredictable currents, our ancestors could have simply followed the land, exploring new territories, hunting game, and establishing settlements. This dramatically changes the narrative of early Japanese prehistory. emphasizing land-based movements rather than exclusive maritime prowess for the very earliest inhabitants. A not detailed to ponder is how the subsequent reflooding of these land bridges, creating the isolation of the archipelago, led to the development of unique cultural and biological traits in Japan. The very insularity that defines Japan today is a direct consequence of these geological transformations. Historians still debate whether specific tools or cultural practices found in early Japanese archaeological sites point to a continuous exchange with mainland Asia via land bridges, or whether unique island adaptations developed rapidly due to periods of isolation. But looking at the now exposed paths, the connection is undeniably clear. It's almost as if the land was telling them, "Hey, come on over, the water's fine, just kidding. It's all dry now." Your journey across the vast, now dry globe continues, pushing south and east, away from the newly revealed Japanese land bridges. As you traverse what was once the expanse of the Pacific Ocean, the air grows warmer, carrying a distinct, almost primeval scent of ancient earth. Then, a colossal landmass, unlike anything you've seen so far, unfolds beneath you. The familiar outline of Australia, but immensely expanded. You are hovering over the fully exposed Australian continental shelf, and it's a sight that utterly transforms your understanding of this ancient continent. Imagine Australia, not as an island continent surrounded by deep ocean, but as a truly gargantuan landmass, significantly larger than its modern-day footprint. The familiar coastlines have expanded outwards by hundreds of miles in many places, revealing vast, low-lying plains where shallow seas once gently lapped. You can clearly discern the remnants of ancient coastal plains, now dry and dusty, stretching out into the distance, interspersed with what look like the dried beds of enormous rivers that once drained this expanded land. It's like Australia decided to put on some serious weight, pushing its boundaries far beyond what any map currently shows. During the last glacial maximum, when global sea levels were at their lowest, the Australian continental shelf, along with that of New Guinea and Tasmania, became largely exposed, forming a single, continuous landmass known as Sahul. This was a truly enormous continent, significantly larger than present-day Australia. This profound geological transformation is a canonical historical event that underpins the very story of human settlement in this part of the world and the unique evolution of its megafauna. Consider the immense ecological implications. With the expanded landmass and different climate patterns, the exposed shelf would have supported vastly different ecosystems than the deep ocean or even the modern coastlines. You can almost see the ancient diprotodons, gigantic marsupial rhinos, lumbering across these vast, dry plains, alongside formidable Procoptodon, the giant short-faced kangaroo, or even the enormous flightless bird, Chenionis. This was a world of truly remarkable and often terrifying megafauna, and their movements and distribution would have been fundamentally shaped by the presence of these exposed lands. It would have been quite the safari, though you might need a really big jeep. For early human populations, the exposure of the continental shelf was absolutely vital. It was across this vast, continuous Sahul landmass that the first humans arrived in Australia, likely from Southeast Asia via Sundaland. Remember our journey across that? They didn't have to make long, perilous open ocean voyages between distant islands. They could have followed coastal routes, navigating through now dry river systems and across vast plains. The precise timing and routes of these early migrations are still a subject of intense research. But the sheer scale of the exposed shelf highlights the much greater accessibility of the continent during glacial periods. An odd detail, perhaps, is that the very ancient rock art sites found in northern Australia, which today are far inland, would have once been much closer to the ancient coastlines, perhaps even overlooking fertile estuaries. Historians still debate whether the first arrivals maintained a largely coastal lifestyle, exploiting the rich resources of the exposed shelf, or whether they rapidly dispersed inland. But one thing is clear: the exposed continental shelf fundamentally shaped their journey and early settlement, offering a pathway to a new world. Imagine setting up your campsite, only to have the ocean slowly creep up on you over thousands of years. Talk about a property value drop. Your journey now arcs northward from the vast, exposed landmass of Sahul, taking you back towards the cooler climes of Europe. You're returning to a familiar region, one we explored briefly when uncovering Doggerland. But this time, you're diving deeper, stripping away even more layers of geological history. You are now hovering over the colossal, fully drained basin of the North Sea, and what you see is an astonishing tableau of ancient river systems, vast plains, and the profound impact of continental ice sheets. Imagine the entire North Sea, stretching from the coast of Norway down to the English Channel, completely dry. This isn't just a shallowing, it's a monumental exposure of the entire continental shelf, revealing a landscape of truly epic proportions. You can see, with incredible clarity, the intricate, branching patterns of what were once vast, powerful prehistoric river valleys. The ancient River Thames and River Rhine, instead of flowing into a relatively short estuary, would have joined forces on this massive plain, forming a colossal river that snaked its way across hundreds of miles of exposed seabed, eventually emptying into a distant, lower Atlantic Ocean. It's like finding the entire circulatory system of ancient Europe, perfectly preserved in the dry earth. This fully drained North Sea basin reveals the immense influence of the last glacial maximum. Not only were global sea levels dramatically lower, but much of Scandinavia and northern Britain was buried under immense ice sheets. The meltwaters from these colossal glaciers would have poured across this exposed plain, carving the deep valleys you now observe. It's a testament to the power of water, even in a world defined by ice. This profound hydrological system is a truly canonical historical event in the shaping of Europe's landscape, dictating everything from where ancient river deltas formed to where early human communities might have settled. As you glide across this immense, now dry plain, you can pick out various geological features that tell a silent story. There are vast stretches of what would have been periglacial tundra, supporting hardy plant life and cold-adapted animals. You might even glimpse subtle depressions that hint at ancient lakes, now completely evaporated, or perhaps even the faint outlines of old shorelines from intermediate periods of sea level rise. An odd detail, perhaps, is that beneath the modern seabed, much of this exposed area contains vast deposits of peat, preserved ancient bogs and wetlands that tell us about the surprisingly lush, albeit cold, ecosystems that once thrived here. It's like finding an ancient, mummified forest, miles under what is now the sea. And the smell? Probably not roses. Historians still debate whether the extensive network of ancient river valleys visible in the drained North Sea basin might contain undiscovered archaeological sites, potentially yielding invaluable insights into the lives of the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who inhabited Doggerland and the surrounding regions. Imagine stumbling upon a perfectly preserved ancient village, or a mammoth hunting ground, buried not under layers of ocean sediment, but under millennia of dry dust. The potential for discovery is immense, offering tantalizing glimpses into a lost world. It just goes to show, even when you think you know a place, draining all the water can completely change your perspective, and it probably gave those ancient folks a good reason to invest in waterproof boots for their eventual move. Your extraordinary journey to a world without oceans now takes you to the absolute southernmost extreme of our planet, leaving behind the intricate, river-carved plains of the drained North Sea. You traverse the entire globe, flying over the now exposed continents of Africa and Australia, until a landscape of unimaginable scale unfolds beneath you. The air here is profoundly cold, crisp, and clean, devoid of all but the faint whisper of distant ice. You are hovering near the edges of a dramatically shrunken Antarctic ice sheet. And the sight is both breathtaking and slightly unsettling. Imagine the colossal ice sheets of Antarctica, which today cover almost the entire continent, now dramatically reduced, with global sea levels at their absolute lowest due to the massive volumes of water locked up in land-based ice, and, of course, the oceans being drained. In our scenario, the continent itself is revealed in a way that is utterly foreign to us. Instead of an endless white expanse, you see vast areas of exposed rock, immense mountain ranges, and surprisingly, low-lying coastal plains that are currently buried under thousands of feet of ice and ocean. It's like peeling back a giant, frozen blanket to reveal the true, rugged face of a hidden continent. You can discern the deep, U-shaped valleys carved by ancient, much larger glaciers, now exposed and empty. There are vast, bare rock faces, scoured smooth by millennia of ice movement, and enormous, dry fjords, once filled with churning water and carving icebergs, now stretching like silent, empty canyons towards the shrunken ice sheet. This reveal offers an incredible glimpse into Antarctica's past, before it became the frozen wilderness we know today. It hints at a time when its climate was significantly warmer, perhaps even temperate in some coastal regions. This profound geological transformation, the waxing and waning of vast polar ice, is a truly canonical historical event in Earth's deep past. Consider the implications of these exposed coastal regions. While today Antarctica is largely considered uninhabitable by anything but specialized research stations and its unique wildlife, a warmer, less glaciated Antarctica would have presented a very different picture. You can almost imagine coastal ecosystems, perhaps even hardy plants and animals, existing in these newly exposed areas during interglacial periods when ice cover was less extensive. It's a tantalizing thought that some form of ancient coastal life might have existed in regions now thought of as utterly barren. An odd detail, perhaps, is that beneath parts of the modern ice sheet, geologists have found fossilized forests, remnants of lush vegetation that thrived here tens of millions of years ago, long before the continent became permanently encased in ice. Our drained ocean scenario gives you a glimpse of just how much land could be revealed if that ice were to vanish. Historians still debate whether the early explorers and whalers of the 19th and early 20th centuries, venturing closer to the continent, might have glimpsed subtle changes in the ice edge or even hints of exposed lands during warmer years, sparking rumors of a truly habitable continent beneath the ice. But gazing upon this dramatically shrunken ice sheet and its newly revealed margins, it's clear that Antarctica holds secrets far deeper than just frozen water. It's a continent of paradoxes, a stark reminder of Earth's ever-changing climate, and a silent testament to cycles of freezing and thawing that have shaped our world through eons. It's almost like the continent is saying, "Surprise, there's actually a beach down here somewhere. Just don't expect it." And now, as the vast, silent plains of the drained oceans slowly begin to blur around the edges of your vision, feel the weight of this ancient, unimaginable world settling softly upon your mind. The colossal landscapes, the forgotten rivers, the lost continents that once connected our world in ways we can barely fathom. They whisper stories of deep time, of mighty floods and slow, inexorable changes that shaped the very ground beneath our feet. Let the images fade gently, the dust settle, and the monumental silence of those empty basins lull you into a peaceful rest. Remember that the world, even the one we know, is always changing, always holding secrets just beneath the surface. And tonight, we simply got to glimpse a few of them. So, close your eyes, take a deep, soft breath, and drift away. The journey is over, for now.